Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode on People Ops Playbook. I'm Vara, your host. This podcast is for all HR professionals who are looking for practical tools, frameworks, and examples to help you create great workplace. Today's episode is about transforming toxic culture to a most awesome one within the organization. Um, to be honest, we all spend a lot of time in the workplace, more than 50% of our time. And it shouldn't be draining, stressful, awful, but rather it should be exciting and you're looking for Mondays. So, to create that, to unpack that topic and to help HR professionals go from toxic environments, cultures to building an awesome, high performing culture, we have a great guest today, Julia. Julia is more than just an HR executive. She's an incredible business leader, HR partner, and a change agent. She's known for culture transformations like these specifically and delivering outstanding results. And that's what prompted me to reach out to her. She's renowned for elevating employee engagement and building high performing teams. She is super passionate about creating great environments, making every environment better than what she found, and that's what fueled her for over 20 years in her experience in HR. And not just that, but she's also a certified executive Adlerian. Sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong.
Adlerian Coach, yes.
Yeah, with extensive experience across startups, corporate enterprises, and agency settings. Julia, I am super, super excited to have you on the show, and it's a pleasure doing this specific topic with you.
That's great. Thanks, Farah, very much for that incredible introduction. I'm deeply humbled by it. And I'm really, really happy to be here and happy to kind of share my experiences and help others in any way I possibly can.
Amazing. I want to kickstart by talking about HR role in culture building. Talking about HR has come a long way from being an admin role to being a strategic partner and a thought reader, right? How do you define the role of HR in building
Mhm.
those strong workplaces? And how can HR function can be both act effectively as a thought leader and a strategic partner to improve workplaces?
Perfect. Yeah. So I've always, well, the typical definition is, HR's role is really to create a strong workplace culture. It's really to act as an architect and a steward of the organizational's values, the behaviors, the practices. It really is about making sure that you're aligned with what the company is trying to achieve from a business perspective, and also what do they envision from an employee perspective? Do they really care about having most people do? Do they really care about having a positive workplace? If they don't, they should, because happy people do really great work that yield to really great outcomes, and then of course overall success of an organization. I always make it really, really simple. I mean, that is a kind of a textbook answer, but I just always say the role of HR is business led and HR architected. So essentially, whenever I work with an organization, it's always, what do you want for your business? What does the business look like? What does the success of the business look like? And then my job is really to architect the environment around that. Um, I really do believe that great HR is the heartbeat that makes the environment hum. If you have a strong HR team, a strong HR practice, it can really make or break, in my experience, how the whole ecosystem runs. Um, I would also say that really impactful HR is somebody that, like a team or a person or a leader, HR leader, it's really about understanding the business. It's not just sitting in the back. Like, as you said, it used to be pretty much a reactive back office type role, and things have changed. They've changed, but not really. I still meet a lot of leaders that don't really understand the value of HR. And my job is to help educate them. I just always assume that when I speak to new companies, they don't know. I just assume they don't know what HR really does, because most do not. CEOs, C-suite members, most don't really understand, because in my experience, I just feel that many have never had a really strong and positive experience with human resources. And I'm only speaking from my experience only. But usually I'm brought in because that is the situation. They don't understand. They don't understand what I can do to help the business. They don't understand what I can really do to help the people. They don't understand, as C-suite members or CEOs, how I can really help them, right? But I do that by really leaning in to understand, really making sure that I know what's important to them as humans, as leaders, as business people, and then also what sort of environments that they really want to thrive in. I mean, at the end of the day, Vara, everyone will say, "Oh no, having a really great culture is important to us. Having happy employees is important to us." They're saying it, and there's actually doing the work to make that happen. And that's where the disconnect is, I find a lot of the time, is
Mhm.
people will say this is what we want, but they're not prepared to do the actions in order to get that. And I think we'll probably cover that a little bit later. But that's how I'd answer that question.
Absolutely. Do you think that's what drives to a toxic environments where they say it, they want everything, but they don't do it. They do
Oh,
some
100,
completely opposite.
100%. I know this sounds a little bit silly, and I've said it many times with CEOs that I've worked with and leaders. Being a CEO and a C-suite team, I sort of look at it like, your parents of a company, right? And so, we want our kids to be happy. We want our kids to thrive. But what do you do with your kids to help create an atmosphere for them to learn, grow, thrive, feel valued? It's really the same thing in a company. And it all starts from really listening to what the employees are saying. If the employees are saying, we all want chocolate bars on Friday, but you give them jujubes instead, like you're giving them sweets, but it's not what they want. So there's a balance you need to strike, Vara, with um, the inmates controlling the asylum, right? Like there's a balance you need to strike with having the voice too far on the employee side where the business is interrupted,
Mhm.
and having the business go so far on this side they don't really consider the feelings of the employees. And it's really about bringing these two together in the best way. I always find that, and that's what I do. I look for that place in the middle. The people want this. The company is prepared to do this. We're kind of meeting in the middle to find this common ground so we can move forward. But to operate in a way where you're not everyone says, I want to change, I want a happy, healthy culture, but it's the work. It's what it takes to get there. That's where you're going to realize, like, if people are really serious about it. And I would say in every instance, every single one that I have been involved with where I've come in, they say, no, we're ready. It's time. We're ready. And I always say to them, you need to understand what this means. Like, it's going to be hard. Change is hard. A shift of mindset is hard. A request to shift behaviors is hard. Uh, a thought process and how you look at, your employees and their wellness is hard. And it's hard because fundamentally as humans, we don't like to change. We are intimidated by change. We are, we kind of almost go through like a death process of change, right? Like, people have seen these different charts of the evolution of change and what people go through. It's not easy work, but it's absolutely imperative if you want to achieve what you say that you want, which is a happy, healthy culture. And I'm telling you, Var, there's not one CEO that I've worked with where at some point we got bumped up, me and the person, by saying, okay, this is the moment. This is the really tough stuff. Do you want what you say you want or not? Because if you don't do the really hard things, you're not going to get what you want. And thankfully, thankfully, most of the time, they were ready to do it.
Mhm.
Because if they weren't, well, then there's no point in me being there, right? Like, I
Yeah.
could just go play somewhere else with people that really do care about creating high functioning cultures, high performing teams, and get really strong business results. Like, I just am really passionate about that. So if you don't want to do it, it's okay. it's almost like with coaching. You can't coach someone that doesn't want to be coached. You can't transform someone who doesn't want to be transformed. You can't do anything. They have to want it. If they and those moments when it gets really hard, that's where you find out if they want it enough.
Wow, that is so powerful what you just said there. Do you think a lot of traditional companies hire HRs like to, okay, I'll hire the HR now. They will take care of employee experience, employee happiness, and it's all their work. I don't have to worry about it. But then
Mm.
reality is they need to be working with the HR and they need to do a lot of change because it's always comes from the top to bottom, right? From the leaders, how they're behaving, how they're creating environments, everything comes from them. And they have a ton of work to do on themselves before to create that environment, but they have a different mindset. That's why the results are not exactly what they wanted. So do you think that's kind of
So
what?
it is true. You do see quite a bit like, oh, I remember I joined a company once and they said, thank God you're here. I just have a lineup of unhappy employees out my door. They just need someone to talk to. Like, we're so glad you're here. And my first question is, why do you have a lineup out the door? Like, if you have, I mean, you just told me, you said your culture is really great. Well, then why do you have a lineup at the door? Those two don't go together. If you have a happy, healthy culture, you don't have a lineup at the door. And over time, in working with that, like ER issues in that one particular company were like one a year, and like it got really like almost non-existent. So to answer the question, it's really not about an either or. It's not like this is HR's strict accountability. It's the and the and the and. It's not the and or the or. It's HR and the help and the support of the C-suite team and the help and support of a CEO and the help and support of business leaders to really box all the employees in and bring the culture to life. Now, I've had some CEOs where they're like, Julia, I don't subscribe to what you're saying, but I understand it's the best for what we need to do over here to get the best out of the employees so they can do the thing. But I support you. And I'm like, you don't have to love every single recommendation. You don't have to be completely immersed in on board and understand it, but you do need to support it. So you need to support it. And if you just you don't really get it, and you trust me with this, and you and I have your support, and I'm not getting undermined, I'm not gonna, that kind of thing, then we're gonna be totally fine. They don't need to be an expert. And that's what I find a lot. People will feel like, oh, I don't really understand. I'm nervous about this, or I don't really understand. That's okay. That's what I'm here for. And if you don't get it, you don't understand it, it's okay. But as long as I have your support at a minimum, then we're good. Then we can fly forward.
Awesome. Yeah, trust is so important for HR to make a change. If there's no trust from
Huge.
CEO, then
Huge.
there's no change going to happen. Talking about on those signs, I think we're going to unpack a lot of things there, talking about toxic environments. So let's say an HR professional walked into a toxic environment. It's overwhelming and chaotic. I would love to know your approach in that situation. How would you go about assessing the environment and identifying where the toxicity is coming from? And what are those practical methods or strategies do you use to uncover the root causes, whether it's a behavior, whether it's a leadership, like we talked, or it's a processes?
Absolutely. So the first step is always the leadership team. That's the most important. So if I'm brought in, I want to know, who the CEO is. I want to know who are the CFO, you know, CMO. I'd like to meet the C-suite team and observe that dynamic. That's a really, really important start, because if that dynamic is humming, you see respect, you see kindness, you see engagement, that's a really good start. If you see a lot of disjointedness there, that's going to tell me that there's some focus required. The second thing really is hearing then from the employees, right? So, and all this sort of happens as a multi-prong approach. It's all sort of happening at the same time, right? So I'm assessing the leaders. I'm having one-on-ones with the C-suite team. I'm participating in the SLT or CLT meetings. Then it's gathering employee feedback. So putting out a survey and just really covering all the bases. So what are employees thinking about we have to offer in terms of benefits? What do they feel about their individual leaders, about our leadership team? How do they feel about, the amount of communication, the amount of information that we're receiving? How are they feeling about learning and development opportunities? So basically all the HR pillars you want covered in that survey, just to make sure you get a full picture of how people are feeling. You're also going to look at things like, do they have an anonymous survey tool? If they don't, implement one right away. Look at if they have any data on like exit interviews, if they've done things like that, just to kind of look at any toxic patterns, or if there's any patterns leading to maybe one department or one leader. Um, so we talked about the leadership team, then we talked about the employees. Also, just in general, observing just behavioral patterns. Um, I have a rule. I don't have an office. I'm not interested in having an office. I haven't had an office in, I don't know, maybe over 10 years. Once I really got what it takes to understand teams and the business that I'm supporting, I like to sit right out with the employees. So there's no, like, I'm just right out there. I am watching everyone out in the wild, interacting. I'm watching moods. I'm noticing the behaviors of I always like to sit near a major boardroom if I can, because that way, and this is obviously before COVID, but that way you can watch faces coming in of going into a big meeting, coming out of a big meeting. You generally in a big meeting room, almost every employee might find their way walking past you during the day. And you really get a lot of information from the nonverbal data for sure. And, it kind of sometimes if you're really paying attention, you can say, hey, Sally, I've noticed you kind of for 3 days now, you seem like a little bit unlit. Like what's going on? Are you okay? It just offers an opportunity to check in. So looking at behaviors, asking to join some team meetings as well. So going to the different the leads just to say, hey, I want to sit here and just observe. No judge, no comment. I just want to see kind of the dynamic of what's going on. Looking at just the processes, what sort of processes do we have in place? So, yeah, again, communication, are people being communicated to effectively? What sort of resources do employee have? Is it, do they have to spend a lot of time trying to find information? Is it easy to access? A review of the policies and procedures of an organization. Also, number 4, I would say, is looking at direct interviews and focus groups. So, getting a different pool of employees together just to kind of get their feelings on how they're feeling about things. This is if you feel like that would be an extra step I would take if I felt like I didn't get a lot of information from a survey. If I just felt like some of there was some work to be done, or there was something I'm kind of missing and I want to go a little deeper on, that's when I would bring in, a bunch of focus groups and sort of employee discussion forums just to talk some things out. I'd also look at all the data. So again, I talked about in a bit ago, I talked about, what are exit interviews saying. You also want to look at absenteeism, the number of absenteeism, or the level of it. The how many sick leaves? Do we have high rates of sick leaves? That can also be an indicator. What about just general ER complaints and grievances? Are there any cases that are open, harassment, discrimination, bullying, etc.? Is there a tool that the company has on productivity metrics? Is there a drop in certain cases? Is it, just sort of average? Do they want to get it higher? So data is really, really key. And again, we talked about partnering the leadership. That's really, really important. So ensuring that you're working really, really, really fast. And I would say it was something I pride myself in doing, working really quickly to just to gain trust with the leaders, the mid-level management, the department heads, the C-suite, working really, really closely with them and looking for gaps. And if there are gaps, then that's a whole separate topic, but, really leaning into there. And, when you're really looking at warning signs, if you're hearing a lot of click chatter, like if because people especially when HR comes in, there's couple of groups of people. They're really happy that they're there and they're happy to spill all the tea and tell you all the dirt and give you all the information. And there's some people that kind of pull back and retreat because they're a little bit like afraid of HR. That's a whole other topic and we can get into that. But these are the two types of people that tend to be there. But if you get a common theme, if you're hearing people like clicks and negativity and common chatter, you really want to pay attention to that, because that is often the product of, like, this is where the toxicity breeds, is in these cliques of people that just are negative, right? Negativity breeds negativity. And so for me, I really want to pay attention to that really quickly. So if there are negative pockets of people, if it's the same people sort of coming forward with not a lot of positive thing to say, I pay attention to those people very, very closely. I hear them. I make sure they're heard. I make sure I really understand where they're coming from. Essentially, though, when it comes to toxicity in the workplace, these types of cliques and negativity, that's what shuts it down. So that's what shuts a culture down. So it's about getting to that really quickly. And that is often a really, really great place to start. So paying attention to that and not dismissing it as like, oh, they're just disgruntled, really paying attention to where's that coming from, why. Sometimes there's something fundamentally wrong just with the ecosystem in terms of, maybe they don't like their pay or the benefits, or the total rewards aren't where they need to be. Maybe they don't like one leader. Maybe they feel like they just don't have clear access to high level company information that would make them feel safer. Like, what is the health of the business, really? Things like that. And then some people are just negative to be negative. And that is where, for me, you're done. Everyone knows this about me. Once we identify if somebody is negative to be negative, either maybe they've just ran their course, you know what I mean, with the organization or the role. People will often, it's very fascinating to me. People will often just say, well, I'm negative because of this, 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 this. And I said, well, we've looked at all these things. Like, there's nothing material. There's nothing wrong here. Like, you're the only one, like 50 people are kind of okay with this, but you're not. So is it the company or is it you? And if it's you, maybe it's time to part ways with love and respect and a little money. But I'll pay somebody to go to stop the toxicity before it starts. I will do that, because it's just damaging. It's absolutely damaging, and it's really painful to recover from if it starts and you missed it, or if it was there breeding for a really long time before you got there. I've been in both situations. A couple of startups ago nearly killed me. It took about, I would say, 12 months, and it was just so many behaviors left unchecked, so many excuses that people were making, like, oh, the person's just really good for culture and a good time. Yeah, but like, they're not working. Like, they're actually not doing any work. They're too busy socializing. And because they're not doing work, the other people that are working see that. And that's kind of creating a bit of a problem, right? So it's, I guess, the thing, far I look at it, is just let's get real here. Let's get real about what's really happening. And I find that's, a lot of people like to make excuses. A lot of people like to defend. A lot of people like to justify. But, the facts don't lie. So it's what do you want to do with these material facts before you, whether it's data, whether it's through observations, whether it's through, my just observations of how the leadership team is performing, how the leaders are actually delegating, if they are, what is the strength of accountability, in the organization. So yeah, a toxic environment is really, really tough. I've kind of outlined now, like, all the ways to kind of go through it, but I would say number one, it's how is the general leadership team and CEO playing in the sandbox? How aware are they of what's going on with all, what I would say, the worker bees, the kids, right? And then what am I hearing in terms of big, glaring toxicity, toxic comments that are like wrapped in neon lights? Like you really want to focus on that first.
I love when you said you go sit within the people observing the behaviors. I always find it very interesting how HR always ready to talk about performance or managers are ready to talk about performance. But when it comes to behaviors, it's always very difficult conversation to have, whether it's employees, whether directly to the leaders, hey, you're doing this and this is probably not right here and you should be doing this or that. And I found them getting offended and people not usually talking about it. Performance is very easy to talk. These are the numbers. This is what needs to get done, and that's it. With behaviors, I've seen that little challenging for a lot of leaders to talk about with their employees, especially attitude, what is expected here, and things like that, if it is not outlined in their policies or their employee handbook.
That's culture, right? So this is where when you identify, okay, first of all, it's like, okay, what is the current state of the culture? And then what culture do you actually want? Like, you know what I mean? And how do we bridge this closer together? And the big thing is really creating a value system that sticks, because a value system is almost like a religion. Like this is just how we are. If you want to work in, company A, this is what we look like, smell like, breathe like, act like, everything, right? It's then easier to go find that and make sure you're hiring for those values, attitudes, and behaviors. Okay. So let's say I worked for a company once where they believed it was a core value that they believe in, like failing fearlessly. Okay. And so really what that shows is, if people, how that translates like in an interview is, you're really looking for people that are able to check their ego at the door. So, we don't do egomaniacs. We don't do me first. We're a we first sort of culture. And generally people that are all about themselves are very afraid to make mistakes. So when we're interviewing people, we like to ask these questions. Like, when you make a mistake, like, what was the biggest mistake you ever made? How did you get through it? What was the outcome of that? When you start interviewing for the right behaviors you want, and then you eventually build an army of people with these like behaviors, that's when the magic happens. Because if you value, for example, transparent, I always have a saying, I love the term radical candor. If your company really favors a radical candor, and then you hire people like this to come in there that believe the same thing, again, it makes crucial conversations easier. It makes giving feedback easier. It makes everything easier. But you have to want to do it, and you have to keep people accountable to it too. So the main thing is really, when you hire for the values and the behaviors of the company that you're working for, and you hire enough of those people that come in, that's when all the toxicity goes away, because you didn't hire insecure egomaniacs, narcissists, sociopaths, like this kind of stuff. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, I've met some really great narcissists and sociopaths. As long as they use their superpowers for good and not evil, then we're okay. But that's really it. You have to hire for the religion of your company, the value system. I also look at it again. I always weave into parenting. My kids know this is like, you get something, it's please and thank you. Use your manners. Companies are very the same. Like, you're going to want to hire polite people. The big thing too that I always just say is be kind. Kindness is it's such a simple word, but it's one that I always just grill in, you know what I mean, to everyone that I support and work with, CEOs, leaders, etc., and also candidates. If you have a candidate that just seems like very self-absorbed or arrogant or whatnot, they're not going to, the odds of them playing nicely in the sandbox with the team is probably not gonna happen, right? And so you're really looking for kindness, because if people are just genuinely good people and kind people, when it comes to hard moments, they're able to have professional, calm, tough, challenging, scary conversations with a little more ease, because good people just want to have harmony with other good people. So if you just hire an army of really good people that all want the same thing, it just makes the challenges are a lot more easier to overcome.
I think you covered a couple of aspects of what a thriving culture looks like.
Mm,
Um,
hmm
would love to know if you can share a few more, like what are those elements of the thriving workplace we should
Yep.
know?
So a thriving culture has a clear vision, has a clear mission, and clear values. Everyone needs to know why they're on the bus and where they're driving to. That's really, really important. I find employees can work in ambiguous settings depending on the environment that you're in, but an overall North Star I feel is really, really important for people to stay connected to what they're doing and why. Okay, so that the clear mission, vision, and values is really, really important. If you don't have it, you start working on that right away. Of course, after you've identified everything, right? That comes next. A strong leadership team. So a strong leadership team in every layer. Your CEO, your C-suite, your department heads, your mid-level leaders. And I would tell you, in my opinion, the mid-level leadership team, the people with the most that are closest to the ground, with the most often the most direct reports, these are the people I really like to focus on, because these are the people that are closest to the employees. And so making sure that they are armed with the right skills and abilities as leaders is really, really important. Um, when it comes to strong leadership as well, again, I hate to bring in the parent thing, but it really is, you know, kids and employees and direct reports, they always look to the person above as kind of a barometer of what is acceptable behavior and what isn't. And so it really is important to walk the talk 100%. The minute you see any leader in a position where they're saying, you must be here, you can't be late, you need to be at the office at 9 a.m., you must be, but then they roll in at like 9:38 or like 9:18. That's really tough. It's really tough. You start to lose credibility if you start asking for things that you're not doing yourself. So really focusing, a strong leadership team is important. This, I feel we're starting to talk about it a lot more, but creating a psychologically safe environment. So again, this is we encouraging an environment of open communication, of mistake tolerance. Like I said, making mistakes, turning mistakes into learning moments, right? I worked at a company where on a Slack channel it was called the door of failure, and the rule was anybody can post their, you have to post your own failure, but you can't post the same failure twice. And I was always impressed that as the culture got healthier, more people started posting, right? Because again, you're not hiring for ego and you're not hiring the me people. They're saying, hey, I like, even the CEO would post some things. I would post some things like, oh, made this huge mistake. This is what I learned. So the psychologically safe, making it safe for people to make mistakes, making it safe for people to speak their mind, is really, really key. And again, I'm going to say the no jerks allowed. I'd say one of the biggest comments I got at one of the companies is when I was doing recruitment, on every job description at the bottom, no jerks allowed, period. And that is like an absolute law. And I was always amazed how many people would say, I noticed that one thing. I'm only applying for this job because I noticed that one thing. And I thought that was really neat. And the good news about the company I was working at the time is it was really true. Like, it was really true. A lot of people, like I said, they say things, but we really meant it. So creating a psychologically safe environment, uh, creating having strong employee engagement and empowerment is really important. Making sure that your employees are really engaged with the mission of what we're trying to do, making sure that they feel valued and trusted for their area of expertise or master or craft mastery, making sure that they feel accountable for what they have to deliver, give them a sense of ownership, and giving employees a voice to how everything runs. when I launched HR, any HR policies or, an HR mandate of something, I would always say, guys, is this landing with you? No? Yes? Is it landing? Yeah, it's landing. Or no, kinda, I'm not really sure about this. Okay, let's talk about it. I would always engage employees into the process of what we're trying to create. And then finally, well, no, I got a few more that's top of mind, but recognition and appreciation. A strong company culture recognizes and appreciates their peers. They recognize great work. They're not afraid to give praise to somebody else without fear of dimming their own light. I always just say leaders, I always encourage any people leaders, hire people better than you. And that's tough. A lot of people can say, "Oh, that makes me intimidated because they might take my job." No, if you're a really strong leader and you're doing the right things, you want people to take your job. You do. You want to work yourself out of a job by creating a really good team under you, because if you create a high performing team under you, you invariably win. So, uh, recognizing really strong performers, showing appreciation. There's many ways you can do that. Um, we're So another one, and I've got about a couple of more I'd like to share, but the other one is, work life. People say work life balance. I always just say create an environment of work life harmony. What I mean by harmony is, listen, with the remote work, flex work, people not going into the office, I would say most of the organizations I deal with have the hybrid. They're in the office, maybe 3 days a week, and then the rest at home. But the work-life harmony is do what you need to do, especially in startup space, because it's not a 9 to 5 type of environment. They never are. These, scale ups and startups, it's not a 9 to 5, not 9 to 5 type of thing. So I always encourage employees, take what you need. So I've got people on my team that like, hey, I'm gonna get my eyebrows done, between, 10 and 11 on a Friday. I don't care. You can do whatever you got to do, because I know on the back end, you're going to give me that time. Also, when I do need you, you're going to jump to it lickety split, even if it's on a Friday night. So, especially with my teams, I treat everyone like a grown up. You want to do a workout class at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday? I don't care. I just know you're going to give me that time and you're going to give me excellence. But also, just in general, if you foster an environment where you make people feel empowered with how they do work, they will invariably do their best work. I mean, again, these are simple statements. They have to be monitored in different ways and make sure you have the right people that are doing the right things, of course. But in organizations where I know we've just hired really awesome people, everybody gets it. No one complains if they have to jump on a call because the system went down on a Saturday, because they know that they're kind of doing what they need to do to find that harmony in their lives for ultimate wellness. And then finally, what I would say is just having an environment that's fair and transparent. So I always just say, when I talk about fair, I talk about, for example, employment equity. I always like to operate in a way that if let's say, and this has actually happened once, it was crazy. A CFO, if the thing I worked for printed off all of the employee salaries and it was found on a printer. You can imagine how devastating and interesting that was. So, but it was, to me, it was an interesting moment because I thought, wow, okay. What if we just acted like that anyway? What if, like, in terms of fairness, let's look at employment equity. Let's look at, are the women, like, it really called to the forefront, are we really being proactive about how we're paying people and the levels that we're paying people at? Are we market fair? Are we below? Are we high? So I always like to say, in terms of fairness, always act like everyone could see their salary. And if they could, would it make sense? You know what I mean? If they could
Mhm.
see where they're benching against other people. So I try really hard to operate in that way. And then being very transparent. Now, transparency is an interesting word. People will say, oh, hey, everyone, I hear there's a delay. Or, hey, everyone, there's a delay on getting this deal in. And so we might need to hold off on on paying merit increases. Okay. Most leaders will tell you that's being transparent. I know. And
Mhm.
that's not enough. It raises too many questions. Transparency for me is hey team, we've been running really, really hard at closing this one deal. And this deal was going to help solidify the fact that we were going to pay our increases. So here's the plan. We really believe that this deal is now tracking for Q2. And so when the deal comes in at that point, we will revisit the merit situation. But for right now, we just have to hold. But we will keep you updated on the progression of the deal. But right now, it looks like it's tracking for Q2.
Mhm.
Transparency is explaining, giving a little more detail, just enough to be dangerous, so people don't have any more questions. Because here's what I've also learned, and this kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier about creating toxic circles and things like that. When employees don't know the truth about something, they make up their own.
Mhm.
And when that happens, they like to find their little friends, pod mates, to sort of start the swirl on stuff. And then suddenly that announcement of, hey, we're not paying merit increase means, oh my God, the company's tanking. The company's going under. Oh my God, we need to find other jobs. This is terrible. What does the CEO do? People can really spin out. So for me, anytime you, especially any communication about money, whether or not we're paying a bonus, whether or not we're doing the merit increases, whether or not promotions are going to happen, give as much information as you can just to be dangerous enough, and do it on multi-channels, like in a company meeting. Hey guys, you might have seen that email come out. Want to just talk about it a little bit further? Hey guys, you want to see this announcement that happened on email and Slack? We're also want to talk about it here. Hey guys, you might want to hear about this thing that your manager told you saw on Slack, you saw it in email, and now you're hearing it now. This is what's up. And just make sure you take a multi-prong approach to that communication. But the transparency is really, really key. So I always just say, whenever a communication is going out, I tell leaders, be proactive, put an FAQ under it. Think about what they're going to add. You're going to drop this piece of information or this bomb or this something. What are the questions that are going to come? Get in front of it. And if you start to hear the whispers like, oh my God, the company is going under, you dive right into that. Hey folks, I thought everything was clear because we communicated this one thing in 4 different channels. We're still hearing some rumbling. So I think let's jump on a call and answer any questions that you have. You want to get in front of it, snuff it out quickly.
Honestly, you went so detailed in every aspect on building a thriving culture. It's amazing. I would love to, honestly, this is great. So I'm very curious. We talked about assessing the toxic culture and then going from there to a thriving culture. Would love to know in a scenario where there are a ton of people who are negative there and they still um, are there while you're building the culture, building the mission, vision, values, you know what behaviors you need. Do you hold on to the recruitment process? Because when the top talent comes into the place and this negative people are still around the company, that would bring down the top talent or they would eventually leave. So how does the process goes like? What does a timeline look like for from going from toxic environment to a thriving environment? So it's all smooth and nice and neat.
Yeah, it is smooth and nice and neat. That's funny. Sorry, it's really funny because there's nothing smooth and nice and neat about it. But here's what I'll say. So first of all, and people need to understand this, and this is why again people like, and I'm always upfront, Vera. When a CEO says to me, I'm like, I just had a conversation with a CEO a few weeks ago who was just, hey Julie, I've heard you've done this thing. I've had some questions about it. What are your thoughts? And because we need to turn this culture around quickly. And I said, well, it depends on where your starting point is. You know what I mean? Like you got to assess the starting point. In average, what I tell people when they ask me this, it can take anywhere between 12 to 18 months, realistically. Okay, realistically, on average. It can be a little sooner. If it can be a little sooner, rarely it shouldn't be longer because people can't handle it. That's too much. Like 18 months. If you can't get it together by 18 months, something is totally wrong here. But even big corporate transformations, like, massive companies and stuff like that can make a change in 18 months. So like 12 to 18 months, I would say, is average. And there's plenty of there's plenty of wiggle room in there. So I'll just talk about the timing first, and then I'll answer the question. So really, to assess a culture is going to take about like 1 to 2 or 4 weeks. Gather the insights, look at the gaps, analyze the data. So assessing the culture is about 1 to 2 weeks. Defining the new culture, that can take a little longer. I would say I defining the new culture could take, 2 to 3 months, really. Creating the clear vision statement, looking at establishing the behavioral norms, clarifying the core values, et cetera, et cetera. Gaining the leadership commitment, that can often take a few months as well. Communicate the vision, that can take several weeks. You have to align systems and processes, look at policies, reinforce the new value model through recognition. You have to embed the culture. You have to embed the new operating model like within the culture. That can take about 6 to 8 months, 6 to 12 months right there.
Mhm.
Creating rituals, encouraging, peer influence. The one thing about change is when you're going on the journey, really finding your, like I said, there's always a couple of different people. There's some disgruntled people, but there's people that are just craving for change. Really kind of gathering a focus group of these people together is really, really helpful in helping you kind of move through the change that you need to do. And then finally, it's just about continuously adapting and improving. It's about being flexible. It's not about saying, okay, this is who we are and this is how it's going to be. I worked at one place for 5 years where we changed we changed our mission and value. No, the mission was always the same, but we changed our values to underpin it 3 times in 5 years because we started bringing in the new people. So to your point with answering, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with bringing in rock stars? Once you've established what your new DNA looks like, what that person looks like, how do you bring them in, to to an environment or a pocket of people that's, maybe not, that are toxic. So first of all, toxic people, sorry, they just need to go, period.
Mhm.
If you've really leaned in, you've spoken to them, you've definitely cross-checked, it's no one else's fault or it's not a department or anything, it's really the person, they have to go.
Mhm.
And this is where the hard part comes in, because a lot of times, I don't know, but it often parallels that these people that are the most toxic are often deemed what I call sacred cows. They are favored by either a CEO, they are favored by maybe another leader, and they feel protected to say whatever they want to say. And again, I have no interest in throwing people away, but I do have an interest in creating a great culture. And so when you have a toxic person or a team that thinks they can get away with everything and they're actually impeding what a CEO has told me that they want,
Mhm.
that you just got to shine that light on them. You just got to say, listen, this is, and that's where things get really rocky, because I think CEOs can often wish the person would get out of their own way and rise to the occasion instead of just hiding behind whatever big name is out there. Um, and that's the tough part. That's when you're going to know if a CEO or leader is really serious about the company, or if they just want to kind of run a daycare of
Mhm.
of of people that, because they just don't want to be a bad person. That's when you're going to know. And it's only then when you sit with the CEO and they're like, I'm ready to say goodbye to this person. If we know, Julia, we've done everything to bring them to, as we've brought them to the river to drink. We've done everything that we can. We've explained it to them. We've encouraged them. We've, given them insights. We've tried to turn them from a closed mindset to an open mindset. If it's not working, they just got to go, because then you won't get what you want. Now
Yeah.
let's talk about what we want. We want this new DNA to come in. And the reality is this. I always find CEOs, most of the CEOs that I've had are male, and I just find the car analogy is a really good one. And I always just say, listen, If you want me to hire a Ferrari and a Bentley, they're not going to share a racetrack with a Ford.
Mhm.
They're just not going to do it. Ferraris, Bentleys, Lamborghinis, they want to drive with the same car. They don't want to drive like with Fords and Chevys and Toyotas. They just don't. There's nothing wrong with either of these cars. But if you tell me that it's important for you to have like luxury cars, well, this is how it is. People want to play, and it doesn't mean levels. You can hire, an entry level Lamborghini. You know what I mean? You can hire an entry level Lamborghini. They're still not going to play with an entry level Ford. They're not going to do it. If you want the good people, if you want the we people, if you want the no jerk, if you want, we're hiring for skill and talent, they will not tolerate anything in opposition of that. So again, we are at a crossroads. What do you want? This is the time that you're going to tell me this is what I want. So essentially, Baron, I really want to make sure that I echo this, because I've had some leaders like, whoa, Julia, you're cutthroat, or you're battle axe, or you're mean, or you're like just telling me all the problems. And that's not true. I always just tell people, listen, my job is to shine the truth, not my truth. And that's a very important distinction, because people said, oh, well, just your way is the highway. No. My job is to shine the truth of what is going on in this company based off the data, insights, observation that I have seen in your company. This is it. So it's not my opinion. This is what the information is telling me. You either listen to that and believe that to be true, and then explore the recommendations that I make around these things, or you don't. You get to choose. You can choose whatever you want, but then don't come to me and say, how come I'm not getting this happy culture I wanted? These are the hard moments, Farah. These are always the hard moments, especially in the interview process, when I tell every single leader, this is what hard is going to look like. Like at some point, you're going to blame me for exposing some things. You're going to not be happy that I'm shining a light on a sacred cow that you really, really love, who may not be effective. And sometimes people don't need to go, Vara. I mean, a lot of times they don't. They just find a different place for that person, like out of the line of fire. You know what I mean? Which is fine. As long as they're out of the line of fire, they're not hurting anyone, they're not being toxic, they're not acting as a speed bump on the autobahn where the big cars are kind of rolling. That's a problem. But move them over to the side so they don't get hurt if you want to keep them safe and you want them part of the ecosystem. But if they are negative, that it has to be unacceptable. Because again, it's what I said earlier. People, I'm sure you would have heard this quote before, but there's nothing more demotivating for a strong and great employee than watching a leader tolerate a bad one. Done.
Yeah. So I always seen those employees who are producing ton of revenue for the company, but have super poor attitude and creating a lot of negativity, and leaders always in the dilemma, like, should I fire them? Should I keep them? Or they're bringing a lot of revenue to the company. And I always seen them as the low performing member, no matter how much money they're bringing, even though considered as like the high performing, but they're still as a low performer because they're going to bring the company down eventually.
So here's the thing. Unfortunately, I've probably terminated about 2,000 people in my career so far. And here's what I can tell you, like, for a fact. And this is like 20 years and maybe both hands. Okay. People don't lose their job because of an inability to do a job. Like, quite often that's happened 10 times where it's a total whoops. Like, holy smokes, did we misread this candidate, or not really kind of lean in maybe too deep on the skills. Like they actually can't do it. Like they actually are unable to do it. That's about literally like 10 times, 10 out of 2,000. Most of the time, people will lose a job because of how they do their job. Are you showing up late? Are you being disrespectful? Did you engage in any sort of fraudulent behavior? Are you a really amazing salesperson who harasses, another member of the team?
Mhm.
Again, I've worked in all environments, and I've seen environments, just the ecosystem is too big and it's too ingrained that they just accept that. Oh, we don't care. Sexual harassment case, we'll pay the lawsuits, no problem. This person's bringing in too much money. So I've been in environments like that, and I leave because that is not my values.
Mhm.
And so again, this is what I'm saying. That's a this company problem. It's
Right.
not. I can't change it. You know, as one person, especially if they're really really big companies, you can't change it. You
Mhm.
can do your best. Um, but I realized, whoa, like this is the culture. This is the DNA they have chosen, and that's not for me. So
Yeah.
I leave. Like I'll just leave. Like I've got no problem doing that, right? This is where I've really found a lot of love in the startup or the smaller to mid-sized companies, because there's still an agility there to change. There's enough open mindsets there to
Mhm.
change. There's enough willingness uh to attempt to change and learn new things. But some really big companies, like it's like the whale is just too big to move, and one person isn't going to do it. And so again, that's it, and this is what I say to everyone, right? Whatever environment you're in, like check yourself first. Like if I'm the one that's really unhappy and I'm starting to go, whoa, this is terrible, like these people are tolerating this, well then I'm being the negative one. Me, problem's me. Like everyone else seems okay. Like this,
Mhm.
they're totally fine. Sexual harassment cases, they're totally fine paying $10 million a year in lawsuits. Not for me. Like, so I think I'm gonna go. So, again, this is what I'm saying. Like companies, they are like a religion or a family of sorts. And I don't like to say we're a family. I don't like to use that term because, people say, and I find most CEOs like, I want to be like a family. Well, you don't terminate your family. So,
Mhm.
how about that? But we definitely want to be a strong, cohesive team. But the thing is with big corporations, if you feel they can't make an impact, then you don't. And I think that's what I've learned in my journey about what really fires me up is making sure that I'm in an environment where it is possible to create this ideal workplace of people feeling safe, secure, productive, happy, high engagement scores, low short-term disability and sick leaves. This is really important to me. But I've worked in some companies where it's like, oh, we just have way too many short-term disability cases, all for the same reason, all pointing towards towards one leader and the stress levels. We just need to hire more people to take care of the people on leave. But you don't want to. Oh, we're not gonna fix it. We're not gonna do that. Oh, okay. And then I generally that's it's just not for me. That environment is
Yeah.
not for me. I'm I have a strong work ethic. I'm very accountable. I encourage, like that's who I am. I encourage that, with the organizations that I work with, and I don't like band-aid solutions. I like real solutions, and it's the real ones that are often the really hard ones, right? Because when you talk about performance, you're like, listen, Vara, like I know you're really working hard, but we just need this extra sort of push, from you. And if you're either unwilling, unable, whatnot, let's get real about that.
Mhm.
Let's get real, because I don't think it's fun for you if you're working in an environment where you don't feel like you're winning.
Mhm.
How that doesn't sound fun to me, right?
Yeah.
Um, s-
Honestly, Julia, I admire your communication skills so much. You get real. You talk the language of the person Like how you're giving example of CEO and his mail and you're talking about cars is so effective. When we use HR jargon, it always goes above their head. They don't understand, okay, happiness, employees happiness, you want to do like buy them beer or take them for team building activities and happiness and everything, but they don't really talk about it. They don't really get it unless you talk their language. And I love how every scenario you get to the person, you see how they're talking, and you use that language to get them and
And it's
influence them.
important to build trust, and it's important to meet people where they are. Listen, I've had CEOs that have like terrible potty mouths. I don't care. Doesn't bother me at all. And in fact, if it helps me to join them, I can join them, in that language. Well, it doesn't bother me at all. Whatever, they need or who they are. And, obviously it's like within closed doors and that kind of stuff, right? Like we definitely you want to have a nice, persona, you know what I mean? For all the employees and things like that. But I'll meet a CEO there. That's not a problem. I've also had CEOs that are very, well-spoken. They don't like to use any foul language. They have a softer personality. I'll meet them there. That's no
Mhm.
problem. Like, whatever I can do, because that is my job. My job is to support the leader. That is my
Mhm.
job. So I have to meet them where they are. I can't expect them to join me where I am, and I've served so many leaders over the years that I can meet you where you are. And I've had all the colors of the rainbow in terms of all the different personalities. And even so, again, you can be anybody and show up however. I will not tolerate if you are like a draconian, like nasty boss and you rule with like a dictator and with an iron fist and you don't care. I won't support you. I just
Mhm.
straight up I won't. I've had a lot of, creative ones, crazy ones, difficult ones, challenging ones, but fundamentally, if they're good people in their heart, I'll support you all day. I'll support you all day, and I'll meet you exactly where you are. Doesn't bother me. It doesn't mean that I'm faking anything by meeting them where they are. It's just that's how you build trust. Is you understand that, if they listen, if I have a CEO pop off on me and like screw this and blah 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 and, like yell at me, I would rather you swear at me and get really upset with me because I can handle it and help get you through it, so you don't go and yell at your staff, you
Mhm.
don't go home and yell at your wife, or your husband, you don't kick your dog, you don't yell at your kids. I would rather you sound off on me because I can handle it. I don't take things personally. I try to seek to
Yeah.
understand. And so I've I feel that has been my, I guess, trick, if you will, to build trust really quickly, is that I'm pretty unbreakable. Like I'm pretty unbreakable when it comes to um the dynamic human personality and tradition because I've supported all.
Wow, that's very impressive. I aim to be like that one day. So we talked about toxic culture, elements of it. We talked about thriving culture.
Mhm.
Now I would love to know, how do we sustain that thriving culture? You've built it. It's awesome. Leadership is great. Culture is great. Everything is set stone. How do you ensure that it doesn't go back to where it was?
Uh wow, that's that could be a challenging one. You can't take your foot off the gas. You cannot take your foot off the gas. Just because things are working and humming, you cannot for a moment um take it for granted.
Mhm.
I think one thing that helps with that is the fact that it's such hard work. I think anyone who has gotten through that to the other side is an idiot if they end up sliding back, because it's just too much work. It's incredible amount of emotional work, intellectual work, physical work, quite often. So really, it's about making sure that the culture that we're trying to create is really cemented in the onboarding, how we onboard our employees into the ecosystem. Also, orientation programs will help.
Mhm.
Uh, so when people join company, that I've worked for, the onboarding is really top notch. They really feel clear on where they're going, why they're there, who they're meeting with, why they're meeting with them. Also having, like I said, the right on orientation programs with IT, with HR, with their new teams to really get the flavor of the organization. So that cultural immersion is really, really important. Making sure that, for example, once you've really solidified your culture and your values and things like that, I worked in my last organization. We would have like in our monthly company meetings, we'd have a value and action channel. So let me back up a bit. So on Slack, we had 5 values, and what we encouraged our employees to do is when they saw another employee living that value, to make a submission to say, hey, I saw Vara demonstrate the value that we believe in failing fearlessly, and this is how it showed up, this is what she did, and I just want to showcase her for that. At the end of the month, right before the employee meeting, we would have a section of the the monthly company meeting where all of the submissions would be kind of like put for everyone to see. And then a name would kind of be drawn out of a hat to see which one won. And then they would
Right.
get like a $25 gift card to, Starbucks or something like that. So the employees loved it. Like they loved it. And again, that fosters that culture of recognizing each other and things like that. So that's how you make it sticky. You get people to not just say, hey, do you understand our mission and values? It's like, hey, when you see it come to life, say something about it.
Mhm.
Um, Offering, really the way to keep it sticky is really shining a light on mentorship, making sure that everybody has somebody that they can learn from, whether it's a peer-to-peer, whether you have somebody who may be on one team and they want to go to a different team, and just making sure that they're really paired up with some culture chat champions, I would say. Because, sometimes often when you do get a really great culture going, people are really proud, to be ambassadors of it. And so making sure who those ambassadors are, pairing people with those people, just so they can get familiar. Recognition and reward systems, that's really, really important. You keep things values-based awards, peer recognition awards, transparent reward criteria. That I talked about a little earlier, but that's also a way to keep things going, and not take your foot off the gas. The feedback, having very clear, transparent feedback and communication channels. Get those do pulse surveys. Make sure you have a Q&A session in your monthly
Town hall?
meetings or
Mhm.
town halls or whatnot. The anonymous feedback tools are great. And here's actually something I'd like to say about that. When I first started at one startup, oh my gosh, the anonymous communication tool had to be answered every day, because there was about 4 or 5 submissions every day, negative. And eventually, like, that was turned into a bit of a data like metric for me. Is when the toxic went out, the questions first, and then the questions went down, and then the questions started popping up that were really, really smart. But it was always funny because some people didn't believe that it was a confidential survey, and we would tell everyone it's confidential. We don't know who it is. And so every month, we don't know. Actually, we do know who it is because they ended up owning it, but that was great.
Mhm.
But every month, one employee would always write one ridiculous question, like a completely ridiculous question. And my CEO, I remember the CEO was like, I'm not answering, like, this is ridiculous. Why would I answer that? I said, answer it. We've told them we're going to answer every single question. So answer it. Like, they know that they submitted that question. And if you don't answer it, they're going to think that we're lying. And it would always be like, hey, CEO, what do you think about, the milk in the US compared to Canada? Do you think having a carton of milk is better or 3 bags of milk? Like, and we would just start answering this goofy stuff. And what was interesting about it is when the CEO would just engage in a little bit of silliness with this, like, it sort of, again, it act like and show a little vulnerability. It
Yeah.
also sort of helped create this fun. And so, it got to the point where the CEO was like, we got more goofy questions. And then the CEO would be like, okay, I saw the goofy questions, but I'm only going to pick one because we the entire time. But he would, and it was always good fun. So just making sure that you have the feedback and communication channels that are always open, that people feel heard. Leadership development training. Make sure that any manager going in to lead a team is equipped. I developed a program called like a manager 101 training or leadership 101, and just really making sure that they feel equipped, because quite often, Vara, some people can be an amazing, let's say, software developer, and now they're suddenly in charge of a team. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to give one-on-one feedback. They don't know how to have weekly meetings. They don't know. So you need to teach them. And so you make sure that you keep all the work that you've done alive by making sure that people are trained up in the image of what you're looking for. And also really fostering that collaboration and that connection. Again, the one-on-ones are really, really important. Encouraging these social events is also a way to keep things alive, right? And then always tying things back, like, hey, we believe that, I don't know, if people have a value around a sense of community and collaboration, it's like, oh, the team, the engineering team got together for a big social. They did some, an escape room, and that's showing, collaboration and action or something like that. So really always tying activities, promoting activities, and then tying them into your values. And then, finally, the biggest thing is, well, there's many things I could say about this, but let me kind of think through. Okay, I would say doing regular culture audits. So, really asking people like, hey guys, is this working? And so just asking, hey leader, can I be a part of this meeting? I kind of just want to do a little culture pulse check. Like, is it working for us? Like, is everything okay here? So I guess in short, there's many things I could say about how to maintain it, but the most important thing is just not taking your foot off the gas. If you've done surveys to get you where you need to go, you keep doing them. You keep giving responses to them. And that's the important thing. Never ask anybody's opinion if you're not willing to talk about, what you're going to do about it, good or bad. So definitely that. So keep the engagement scores going. Make sure the leaders are continually on board with the environment, the behaviors that we're looking to see. Making sure you don't take your foot off the gas and make exceptions in the interview process. Making sure you don't let one toxic person, slide. You always really hold the whole, like, no jerks allowed thing, or the good human thing. Really hold that paramount. And also create the psychologically safe is a big one. Do you know how many leaders have come to me first and said, hey, Julia, I'm just letting you know. And this is when I know we're in a really good spot, is when they say, listen, I'm going to resign. And I don't want you to tell my manager. I want you to help me do it in the best way, because I'm just kind of afraid, you know what I mean, of how this is going to land. Like, that's amazing. Like when people do that and they come to you first to say, hey, like, I really love this company, but I got this really great opportunity. And I just have to take it, but I want to make sure I'm handling my exit in the right way. So, when you get to a place where people, like, and I've worked in, these are the sort of the areas that the cultures I like to create. People go to HR first, you know what I mean? Which is amazing, because they know that the team that, I create is one that you can really trust and really help them out. Here's the other thing I've done in my surveys too. I ask the question, and I will tell you, I'm the only department who's ever done it, but any employee survey, I ask the question, do you trust your HR team? Yes or no? Do you feel that you get the best advice to help you with your situation? Yes or no? What does HR need to do differently to gain your trust? And I will tell you, I had to stop asking the question, because we were getting a like 99, 98, 99%. That's insane. Like, you never hear that. But I think a large part of it is the teams that I've always created are right in the business. They're not off to the side. Again, the office really matters. Where you put yourself matters. Because if people can know that they can talk freely, even if they're upset, even if they're frustrated, even if they think a decision's ridiculous, and they can have a healthy complaint section with a colleague, because that's okay. I mean, everyone can complain.
Yes.
We all have bad days, right? But
Yeah.
to know that they can say it and I can hear it, and it's okay. It's just that's just a moment. It's not.
So in one of the survey, it says that, do you have a best friend at work? And I
Mhm.
often find it very helpful because sometimes you just have to release that frustration, but you're a good employee. You're great. You do everything great. It's just
100%.
having someone is always good. And
Oh,
yeah,
it's really important. I call them my work husbands, my work besties, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. I think these are very healthy things, but that's the whole thing. You want someone to hold, like, we're all human. There's a difference between having a bad day, a bad moment, a bad meeting, a venting sesh. Um, that's fine. It's when, again, the repetitive behaviors are happening where your venting turns into malicious intent, and that's what you're looking after. That's what you're looking
absolutely.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And few final thoughts. Would love to know, what does
Mhm.
coaching and leadership development play in this process?
Yeah. Once you build your trust with the leadership team, and just so we're clear, some are interested in being better and some are not. And those that aren't, but they're not bad people and their teams are thriving and they don't I don't, it's fine. If it's not broken, we don't need to fix it, right? For the people that want it, and I would say most do, it's about really identifying where their insecurities and weak spots are. But that comes with definitely a sense of trust. And when someone can say, listen, I got to be honest, I feel really insecure at the idea of hiring somebody stronger and more skilled than myself because I'm actually not educationally trained in this area. And so I feel really insecure about that. Okay, let's talk about that. You know what I mean? Like, how does that show up? How can you work your way around it? So I almost say that, I'm sort of like a gift with purchase. Like, it's sort of like HR is what you hire me for, but I do have the coaching hat on. And I definitely act like that and wear that hat with the C-suites, with my CEOs. And the whole idea is with positive intent. I always go with positive intent. I want to understand, like, all your shiny side and your not so shiny side. So I can help you kind of navigate, through this. And it does take time. Some trust can happen really, really quickly. Some you do need to work at. But the ultimate goal, and what I always tell leaders is like, listen, I'm on your side. I want you to be the best leader that you can, and I'm here to help in any way I can, like in any shape that's possible, and anything that I can possibly help with. So I would say that's really it. It's knowing the leaders. So, because again, you got your CEO here and you got your C-suite here, and sometimes they're not aligned with the C-suite, with the
Mhm.
CEO. And so I've often played that role too in the middle, going, okay, I know CEO said this. I think this is what they really mean though. So we
Mhm.
got to kind of focus on this and really act like that. Well, in some roles I've assumed the role of chief operating officer too, so I've sort of taken that on. Um, but just knowing that they feel like if they come to me and they're like, God, I'm so mad at the CEO right now. The CEO is a big jerk or whatever. It stays here. Like, I don't, it's everything is held right here. Like, I'm here
Mhm.
to help you and I'm also here to help them. Right. So if I hear a theme, for example, where maybe three C-suites are like, our CEO is X, 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 I'd be like, hey, boss, there's a theme percolating here. I just want you to know about it. I'm
Mhm.
working on it.
Mhm.
And the first thing is, well, who? That's not important. Because again, if I break trust here, then the minute you got a broken trust problem with HR, you're done. Like, it's over and it's
Mhm.
almost impossible to get back. But I always say, listen, there's a theme percolating. I'm trying to get to the root of it. One thing would be helpful if you may not, if you may avoid talking about this one particular thing for a minute, that would probably be real helpful. Could you do that? And, just sort of trying to kind of play all the sides to keep the harmony.
If you had one piece of advice for HR professionals walking into this toxic workplace today, what would it be?
My gosh. I so the process to transform is really, really hard. It requires, as I said, a lot of personal and professional strength, grit, and commitment to navigate yourself and the employees through the change. And know that if you avoid the hard thing, it will never heal. It is just Band-Aid stuff.
Mm.
So for anyone going in, and this is an HR trait that I sadly don't see a lot, and I want to see more, although I am seeing flickers of it,
Mhm.
is to transform a toxic culture requires yourself to be very self-confident in your craft. Now, like, we all have insecurities and things like that, but if you know that you know your craft, you're not arrogant about it. You're not like, I know everything, like there's nothing left for me to learn, but you're really confident in your craft. That's important. The other thing you need to have is and that's not the part that's unique, but the unique thing, the unique traits that I think is really important is being bold and courageous. HR practitioners, a lot of them, because they're in charge of the policy and towing the line and setting the rules and this kind of stuff. I mean, all of these for me are guidelines. At the end of the day, we're dealing with people.
Mhm.
So really tap into your courage and your boldness of saying what needs to be said in order to move something forward, and do so with positive intent, empathy, compassion, and care. If you do that, you can say anything and you don't have to worry that, like, oh, I just look like the big bad HR person. They might think that. But I always just say to people, lead with intent, positive intent. Hey, Vara, um, it is really important that that you and I have a collaborative, trusting relationship. I'm not getting the feeling that we're on the right track for that. Here are the data points
Mhm.
that have told me,
Mhm.
that are telling me this. Am I right or wrong? And quite often they'll say you're right. Sometimes they'll say they're wrong and they're lying to you, which is tough. So you got to, work to peel that onion back a little bit further. But the idea is I'm here to help you, right? Um, and so being bold, being courageous, being fearless
Mhm.
about I don't like the word hard conversation. I always say crucial conversation, being fearless about the crucial conversation,
Mhm.
telling the truth about things, not mine, not my opinion, but the truth about things. Um, and walking the talk is being able yourself to walk with the talk. You can't ask people to follow policies and things like that if you're not doing it yourself.
Mhm.
Um, but again, this is all very hard work because you need to you need to have grit, you need to have resilience in order to get through it, because you will be met with a CEO that kind of loved you and then suddenly doesn't, because
Mhm.
things are getting really hard, and continuing to sit in that canoe with them, knowing that, like, you're here to help them through it. Also the employees, making sure that they're heard. And then also, there's times where people like, you're never going to make it here, Julia. You're too corporate. You don't understand. Like, this was like in the early days, and just being like, getting lambasted by toxic people, like, can really take you down. And I remember I hired a person to join me, and she was watching like a smear campaign against me because of the changes that we were doing, that the CEO kind of wanted to do. And she said to me, why are we doing this? Like, why are we doing this? Let's just light a match to this place and call it a day. Like, this is ridiculous." And I just said, it's really hard. And I said, if we don't do it, who else is going to do it? I'm like, do you believe that you and I can do this thing? Do you believe? And they're like, I believe. And I said, if you believe, then we're going to do it. And I'm willing to bet we need about like 6 to 9 more months, because we were like probably like, 9 months in or so. 6 to 9 more months, and we're gonna get to the Holy Land, I promise. But if we don't do it, I don't know any HR practitioner, none, who would come in and deal with this. None. So unless you have any ideas, because if we don't do this, this company is in trouble, like for sure. So it's really about leaning in, right? And so like you have to be bold, you have to be resilient, you have to be gritty, you have to tell the truth, you have to lead with positive intent, you have to build trust really quickly. And these are all the things that, you need to really focus on, in the early days. And just don't give up because it's important. Everybody, every person deserves to work in a healthy, safe, productive environment where they feel that they can thrive and do their best work. That to me shouldn't be people like anything to really like strive for. It should be just the way it is. Everyone deserves that. We spend too long, 8 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours a day. We spend too much time, too much of our awake time at work, away from our kids, away from our families. It has to mean something. It has to. So I just see myself as the ambassador and gatekeeper to make sure that everyone is accountable to create these environments for people because they really are the best ones. Like, I think I'm sad for people that just get delusioned by the big toxic workplaces. They get delusioned that we're tolerating people that harass others and demean others as normal. It's completely unacceptable. And it breaks my heart when they just get to a place where like, oh, that's just the way it is. Like, that's okay. It's not okay. It's not.
Yeah, we need so many HR professionals like you, Julia, in the workplace. Honestly, this episode has been a greatest episode where you shared a lot of insights. And I really especially love how you bring clarity to everything. And I think HR professionals need to become an expert in it, bringing clarity, doing bold moves, being resilient. I think you're like living like a role model for a lot of HR professionals to um, move from away from toxic environments to building that great thriving environment. Because like you said, it needs to be a standard. It needs to be normal. It shouldn't be something that's like nice to have or maybe you aim for. Yeah.
It
So
needs to be the standard. And I really appreciate your kind words. And I really do appreciate, that you see the value in it and that you see it's important, that it's important because work is never going to go away. So what environment do you want to work in? I mean, do you want to work something that makes you feel bad all the time? Or do you want to work somewhere where you feel like you're somewhere where you can win or have a good chance of winning with winning people and winning leaders and winning? And the thing is, it's nothing great comes without hard work. It's extremely hard work, but for me, it's just worth it. Like when you get to that place where those engagement scores come in and those retention rates go up and those attrition scores go down and the sick leaves are non-existent and you have very little ER cases and this is where an HR can really focus on the stuff that matters, which is like developing new programs and tools to help leaders be better than they were or come up with new creative benefits that serve the employees with the money that we save that we're not spending in legal fees, defending, like, you know what I mean? Yeah, I just don't know why anyone wouldn't want that. And I really don't to be and again, I'm coming from a place where I've seen it and lived it all. Okay. And so now I'm really clear on what I really like to do and where I like to play as a professional. And yeah, I don't think like I for companies that have had toxic workplaces that are big institutionalized places, and I think we all have been exposed to them at one time in our life. Like I'm not interested. Like unless I was part of the overall transformation of that, and people are really willing to, like I said, do a massive shift.
yeah.
But otherwise, no. Like
Yeah, and that's what the beauty about HR work. I think it's you can create direct impact on people's lives every single day. Everyone comes to work happy and they're looking forward for Mondays, and I think that all can happen through us, through us in partnership with a lot of others, but HR driving it. And I believe that a lot of more and more organizations need HR like you.
Thank you. That's kind.
Yeah. This episode has been great, and thank you so much again doing this with me. It was amazing, and I hope to catch up with you again.
Thank you very much, Farah. And again, I can't tell you how humbled I am that you chose me, and I am I'm just really touched by your kind words. And hey, we can only do it by getting the word out there. So let's do this, right?
Yes, absolutely.